This conference will now be recorded.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our fourth panel discussion for year 2020. This will be the last one for this year, inshallah. And I'm very, very delighted to welcome all of you to this wonderful day and this incredible topic that we have planned for you. I am very sure that everyone is eager, as I am, to listen to our panel of speakers to share with us the knowledge that they have so that we leave this place at the end of the day much richer and more knowledgeable about our natural environment in the country. There are several housekeeping points that I would like to share with everybody. You will all be muted during the presentations. Only the speaker will be unmuted. And if you have any questions, there is a chat box on the side. Please make sure to write your questions, and then it will be directed to the relevant speakers when we finish the session. And as usual, before we welcome the speakers and before I give them the floor, I usually share with you some updates of what we have been doing since we last met. So today will be the same thing, inshallah. And I'm delighted to say that since the last time that we met in July, a lot has been happening. EEG is a very active hive with communication that is coming from inside the country and outside the country virtually, as well as some physical activities are taking place. All the educational programs that were postponed have been nicely planned for the last quarter of the year. So October, November, and December are going to be very, very busy and very hectic. And I really look forward to all our members, all our supporters, everybody within our network to be actively involved with us. In summer, we rolled out the neighborhood recycling program for our student community. And mashallah, we have 145 students that have registered participations with hundreds, thousands actually, of kgs of different recyclable material that they have managed to collect from their neighborhoods, and they have communicated with EEG to arrange pickup, or they have delivered it themselves. So this is an incredible activity in spite of the difficult time that we are all going through. Our One Root, One Community Tree as well, we have rolled out the second phase of it on the 20th of August, and it will continue until end of November. So whoever is online with us that would like to be actively involved in this platform, please do so. You can reach out to us to get more details, and we will be more than happy to support you to roll these programs within your company, within your school, within your family. We have our students' workshop lined towards the end of October. It's a very interesting topic, sustainability, a global puzzle, and it will be held virtually, and this will be the first of its kind in this size that we are venturing to do it on a virtual platform. We have the popular inter-school and inter-college environmental public speaking competition, both of them nicely planned in the month of November. The inter-school will be in the beginning of November, middle of November, and the inter-college will be towards the end of November. As for our community-oriented programs, we have the can collection drive that will take place in Dubai, and that will be, inshallah, in the first week of November. The Clean Up UAE will be held on 12/12/2020 in the Emirate of Dubai. We will not be able to hold it in the other Emirates this year, but whoever wants to join us from other Emirates, please do so. It will be a very unique program this year. And of course, we will conclude the year with our tree planting for our Emirates we plant, which will take place in Dubai, and it will be on the 20th, on the 20/12/20. So as you see, very hectic schedule, but I am very sure that all our members are excited to be involved with us in these programs. So this is many international engagements we have had participated on the UNEP level, on the Global Investors for Sustainable Development. We have the Global Urban Development. So many specialized bodies that we have been very actively involved in during these months. So summer has by no means been a quiet period here, and we are happy to record that. We come today to this very, very important topic, UAE biodiversity heaven. This is a topic that really is relevant at any time, all the time, everywhere in the world. But now it is more relevant than ever. Scientists and global bodies are saying that there is an irreversible decline of genetic and species diversity and disintegration of our ecosystems at global level, at regional level, as well as on the local levels. They are very concerned to say that human activities are putting immense pressure on the ecosystem and on the biological system of the planet. There was an article that was issued by the World Economic Forum to say that and half of the plants. UNEP says, United Nations Environment Program, says that we are losing wildlife at a 1,000 times greater than any time since recorded history, human history. And we are losing a lot of our wildlife. So we are really on the verge of, God forbid, witnessing or facing a sixth mass extinction in Earth's history. So how do we deal with these issues? Are these only the responsibilities of government bodies, international bodies, or we as members of the society in our different forms? We can really take up the call and play a very important role. We are talking about the importance of this particular topic amidst the COVID-19. And COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the importance of combating the biological loss, biodiversity loss. And studies show that the more biodiverse an ecosystem is, the less likely it is for a pathogen to spread rapidly and pass between animals to humans. So really, it's not only an issue that concerns scientists only, or it's an issue that concerns environmentalists, conservationists. It's an issue of survival. It's a wake-up call for all of us as human species, because we need to maintain a healthy ecosystem to be able to maintain our own health. Having said that, and without further ado, I would like to welcome our wonderful panel of speakers who have taken time off their busy schedules at the beginning of the week, and I'm very honored and delighted to have all of you with us. So we will start with the ladies first, and we have amongst us two wonderful ladies from Al Ain Zoo, an active member of Emirates Environmental Group. I have Dr. Amna Al-Utaiba, and I have Ms. Hind Hassa Al-Qahtani. Dr. Amina is the Director of the Environment, Health and Safety Department at Al Ain Zoo. She has a PhD in medical microbiology at University of Essex, UK. She has more than 20 years of expertise, highly trained professional offering extensive knowledge in environmental sciences, occupational health and safety, business continuity during disasters, crisis management, sustainability and resource management. I know, of course, Dr. Amna personally, and I'm very delighted to have her on board with us this morning. A wonderful and very active lady with passion for that subject matter. Ms. Hissa Al-Qahtani is a conservation program unit head of Al Ain Zoo. She is responsible for developing and managing conservation programs and projects. Her role is to expand the contribution of the zoo in saving wildlife from extinction, not only on the national level but globally. And she goes about that wonderfully by establishing effective partnerships with respected conservation organizations locally and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our two first speakers. Ladies, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, Amna and Hissa, we will be muted, all of us, and you are unmuted so that you can speak and everybody can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Habiba. It was. My name is Amna Al-Utaiba. I'm from Al Ain Zoo, and I will be joining you with my colleague Hissa Al-Qahtani to express some of the concentrated work that we've been doing from 1968 in Al Ain Zoo. I don't know, Miss Habiba, if you can hear us.
Yes, we can hear you very clearly. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Al Ain Zoo, or the official name is the Zoo and Aquarium Public Institution in Al Ain, or we call it Al Ain Zoo, has been established by the late Sheikh Zayed in 1968, which is long time back. And the main concept of establishing the zoo is to take care about wild animal or wild endangered species. And as you can see from our slide, our vision and mission majorly concentrated on protecting the endangered species and taking care of it. Can we go to the next slide, please? Our main participant in goal number 15, life on land, and on this slide I have extracted actually from the goal 15 in the United Nations, and it's giving you just a small summary of what kind of goal and what's the aim of it. As we know that we have a lot of area has been gone through the desertification. Although to continue the word of Ms. Habiba about the effect of Corona, actually as environmentalists, I think we have a good effect. Almost the ozone has been cleared, and now we can protect the earth, and inshallah in the coming years the effect of Corona and the low emission of gas and factories will have a good impact in our environment, in the global environment. Can we go to the third slide, please? I like this picture because I know that some of our participants will be a student from the universities. So to summarize goal number 15, as we can see, they have a list of challenges, and on the right side of the slide there is some solution for these challenges. As a zoo, actually, we tried our best to save or to protect and to help the world and the United Nations, at least from our point of view and within our land in UAE and especially in Al Ain, to put some solution for the challenges. Can we go to the next slide, please? We know that goal number 15, has many targeted, but as Al-Ain we have concentrated in target 15.5 and on target 15.7. Target 15.5, it concentrates majorly take urgent and significant action to reduce the degradation of nature habitat. While on the other hand, target number 15.7 take urgent action to end the poaching and the trafficking of protecting species of flora and fauna, and address both demand and supply of illegal wildlife products. In Al-Ain Zoo, we have started, actually, as I said, we have started in protecting animals. We have also a huge work, and I can say we have done a lot of work, and all of you are most welcome to come and to visit. We can take you on a tour in the zoo and explain to you many of these things that we are going to talk about it. About the plant, actually, we have grown a lot of local plants, which will not need a lot of care, and it will, you know, that we are in a very harsh environment, a desert environment actually, and the most critical point in the desert, you know, is the water. The water is very critical, and nowadays availability of a good water is very challenging actually. So we've been using treated water to treat our plant, and we have changed a lot of surface actually. So in our presentation, we have divided it to two things: how the fauna and the flora in Al-Ain Zoo has been improved. I will be talking. I will show you in the next slide about how we have improved the area and how we try our best to spread the green area in Al-Ain Zoo. And my colleague Hassa will be talking about the fauna part. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, as you can see from the slide, we have taken the pictures showing you the development of the spreading of the greenland in 2002. Of course, Zapia, it's an abbreviation of Al-Ain Zoo. As you can see, maybe 90% of it, it's desert land or arid land. If you move to the next picture, the slide, in 2010, we have started the greenery, and as you can see some changing in the desert side. If you move to the picture, the third picture, 2020, I think you will see a lot of changes and the spreading of the plants. 90% of these plants, as I mentioned earlier, is local plant, and maybe more than 50% of it is endangered species. We've managed with the horticulture team to grow it and to take care about it, and this is what can you see now. And as I said, you are most welcome to come and to join us. We will take you in a tour in our safari, in our zoo, to have a look how we are doing our best to take care about the environment. Hassa, it's your turn now.
Thank you, Amna. Good morning, everyone. It's been a pleasure for me to take part in this important panel discussion that aims to raise awareness about the importance of biodiversity to us and how we all rely on biodiversity to survive. I'm working in the conservation field at Al-Ain Zoo since 10 years now. And during my journey, I have noticed that many people think that all zoos are about having animals in cages and for public entertainment, and that's all. However, many modern and successful zoos around the world has transferred to focus their mission on species and habitat conservation, and it's became their main role. This is how we can contribute in the conservation of biological diversity. Next, please. And conservation is in the heart of Al Ain Zoo since 1980s. Currently, the zoo is holding an important collection of endangered species globally that makes up 30% of our collection. Next, please. Our conservation focus is on arid land habitat and threatened arid land species of the UAE, Arabia, and Africa. And our conservation priority focus is defined through 3 areas: the geographic focus, the ecological focus, and the species focus. Next, please. In order to achieve our conservation mission, we have set some main goals to ensure that all our activities are relevant and directed to maximize our conservation impact. Next, please. So we conduct scientific research activities for the survival of endangered species and develop conservation programs that focus on highly priority species that we have in the zoo. We also work with and support local, regional, and international conservation organizations and maintain our collection and facilities at the highest welfare and safety standards, following the best practices around the world. Next. We ensure to promote the health and genetic of the collection through managed breeding programs and exchange animals with other local and international zoological facilities. We also contribute in raising community.
خلاص اوكي شكرا مشكور اخوي جزاك الله خير.
We can, I think this, can you hear me guys? Yeah? Okay, so we contribute in raising community awareness on issues facing endangered species and influence the community to change their behavior toward their environment. Next. Now, please allow me to share with you some of our key conservation programs, and I would like to start with the Dami Gazelle Conservation Program. The Dami Gazelle, as you may know, that it's a critically endangered species, with only less than 100 left in the wild. The zoo is holding globally an important breeding population of the Dami Gazelle with around 80 individuals. So currently, the zoo is part of an international network that is working to protect and save the Dami Gazelle globally. And after a number of workshops and discussions, we successfully published the first conservation strategy for the Dami Gazelle. Next. We hold the biggest population of the sand cat globally, and it is one of our flagship species in the region. It is classified as endangered in UAE. So we developed the Sandcat Conservation Program and successfully published the conservation strategy and the first Arabian population management plan. And this program was successfully endorsed by WAZA. WAZA is the World Association of Zoos and Aquaria. Next. Currently, we are studying the wildlife that chose to visit and stay at the zoo. Since 2017, we started a research that we are calling it On-Site Biodiversity Study. This research is focusing on studying wild birds, butterflies, insects, and other wild species that we found around the zoo. Next. The zoo also plays a key role in raising awareness and educating community. Education is one of our key pillars at the zoo. We take the chance to educate our visitors through conducting different activities annually, and also participate in local, regional, and global awareness campaigns. Next. And of course, we don't work alone. We believe that successful conservation stories can only be achieved by engaging the communities, local authorities, and expertise. So we have been working with local and international conservation partners, such as the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Sahara Conservation Fund, Liwa Wildlife Conservancy, and we have developed and got involved in various conservation programs to save critically endangered species from extinction. Next. The zoo also built a relationship with respectful local authorities that are contributing in local conservation, education, and research activities. Next. Lastly, I would like to share here some logos of our key memberships and organizations that Al Ain Zoo have been working with to achieve its conservation goal. And this brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, ladies. Wonderful presentation. Beautiful information. It's so good to know. I hope everyone can hear me. Okay, I'm facing the same problem till Gibson. I get muted and I cannot unmute myself.
Hear you, Mrs. Habiba.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Because you show me the sign that I'm still muted and I keep on clicking on it, but it doesn't tell me that, I'm unmuted. Then, thank you very much, ladies, for that wonderful presentation. It's good to know that Al Ain Zoo has got so many effective memberships and partnerships with like-minded organizations from different parts of the world. That is very encouraging, and that is how we share experiences and we learn best practices and we bring the best to our country and our region. I would like to welcome my next speaker, Mr. Brett Gervin. He is the principal of Urban School Dubai, an active academic member, again, of Emirates Environmental Group. Mr. Brett has more than 10 years of experience in the Middle East. He has developed an in-depth understanding of Dubai and the UAE educational climate. Following his love for nature, he completed a bachelor's degree in science, majoring in zoology and post-graduation in environmental science. Let us listen to this expert of how he has understood this topic and how he has incorporated in his educational institution and how has that manifested itself. Dear Brett, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Ms. Habiba. Can you hear me there?
Yes, indeed, I can. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Good morning. Well, thanks very much for having me as part of this panel, and thank you very much to the two ladies from the Al Ain Zoo. Very interesting to see how they're pushing forward to make sure that this is a biodiversity haven. I guess I'm coming at today's conversation from an educational standpoint. My name, as you've said, is Mr. Brett Gervin. I'm the principal at a school called Arbor here in Dubai. We're an ecological school based in the national curriculum, in the British curriculum. And for our lucky 500 children, we have a particularly special program and set of spaces and places where we have the opportunity to ensure all of our children experience nature in a way that perhaps is not so easy to experience here in Dubai. So if you could flick to the next slide, please, Ms. Habiba. Next slide, please. So just while I'm waiting, there we go. So at the Arbor School in Dubai, oh, back one. As I said, we have an experiential take on how nature operates as the best teacher. And so through our special spaces that we have here at the Arbor School, as we make sure that our children will gain an appreciation not only of biodiversity and animals and plants, but what's even more important is the interconnectivity, so the ecological aspect where each species within an ecosystem is interdependent. And then eventually through understanding that, as we understand how human systems mimic or at best emulate natural systems, and then we can look at how those natural systems work and perhaps look at how we could edit, change, fix, or problem solve some of society's problems. Next slide, please, Ms. Habiba. So I guess in a true sort of educationalist sense, as I went straight to the documentation that said, what are we actually talking about when we're talking about biodiversity? And I've just snapshotted a few statements from the National Biodiversity Strategy from the UAE, plus the HE biodiversity targets. And when I started reading these statements, these aren't linked to each other. They're not really sequential. You can see that I've highlighted a few terms, because as I read through them, I noticed this is all about words, and we have to be really crystal clear about whether we're talking about biodiversity, whether we're talking about sustainable use, whether we're talking about sustainable development. We have to be crystal clear about what it is. And each of those concepts, next slide please, is not a synonym for the other. It's not a synonym. So you can see there, if I delete all of the extra content, when we're talking about biodiversity, actually the statements are about capacity building, they're about conservation, they're about ecosystem services, and quite often you see sustainable use, sustainable management, sustainable development, sustainable production. All of those terms, to me, aren't necessarily just about biodiversity. They're critically, they're different. And so we have to be crystal clear about what words we're talking about. Next slide, please. So I guess taking those concepts into my head and sort of trying to assimilate those, I started to think, and I'm being a little facetious here, as I said, well, imagine if we had 16 or 17 really easy goals that the whole world could agree upon and work towards. Or imagine if we had a structural system where we've got expert educators that could deliver this message to large groups of children. And imagine if there was a way that we could help our society to understand. So I guess I'm being a little bit facetious in saying that, the best place to build capacity, the best place to educate for sustainability clearly has to happen in the schools. And that's, I guess, where this change needs to start, if it hasn't already. Next slide, please. So the challenge, of course, though, is once you start thinking, because everyone thinks that education is important, everyone thinks that their particular element of education is important. And when we're talking about good intent, I've just put a quote in here from a musician I like, Ben Harper. And without reading it to you, I'm sure you can read it there on screen. It says that there's good deeds and there's good intentions, and they're about as far apart as heaven and hell. So this divide between knowing and doing, an enormous chasm. So it's really difficult to get from the point of, okay, we know what we're supposed to be doing, to the point of actually, let's get all of our population to do it. And I know in this group, we're talking to, somewhat it's a chamber of echoes, where probably most people in here understand the importance and want to take it to that next step. How we actually inculcate that is the challenge. Next step, please. Next slide, please. So I guess we need to understand that, therefore, that we have a mindset change where all education is environmental education. And it's all environmental education because there is no system, no process, no procedure, no business, no economy that operates outside of the environment in which it sits. It's impossible. Next. I think there's about 4 bullet points on there, Ms. Habiba, so you could probably just skip through those. So we know, as educators, I know particularly, is that it's education is littered with the remains of good intention. This type of technology, that idea, this part of social studies, that part of language, they all dropped into education. And the tricky thing is, keep going, Ms. Habiba, is that if this is a good thing, if we really want this good thing, next one, we have to then stop doing something else which we already consider to be a good thing. There's 2 more bullet points there, Ms. Habiba, if you could just point there. Thank you, and 1 more. So if this thing is really important to us, this idea of sustainability and biodiversity, then we have to decide what other good things we're going to give up. And if it really matters, then how do we make it stick? How do we ensure that it doesn't just become something we do for a couple of days and then abandon again? Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I'm speaking quite quickly. If you could just push about 5 times, Ms. Habiba, 6 times, I think there's 6 points. So from my point of view then, as an educator, I think the key element of this in terms of closing that knowing and doing gap, making sure that people know and then begin to do, is to frame and reframe what it is we consider important. So I've said if the heart of this issue, if we looked at all those words, and sustainability and sustainable development popped up so often, then this issue is actually anthropocentric. It's about us. We're in the middle and we're talking about how we can conserve biodiversity for us. Humans. So what we need to do then is unpick that and reframe it so there's an understanding of how humans can fit into those ecosystems. We need to reframe it so that it becomes an ecocentric view, so that we sit as an integral part of the ecology, as part of the ecosystem, but we don't sit at the center looking out. So once we've reframed it, then we have a better understanding of sustainability. Then we start to connect the dots. And that concept, connecting the dots, understanding the ecological aspects, is termed eco-literacy. And that's why I'm here from the Arbor School, where we build our program around the concept of eco-literacy. Next slide, please. So when we start talking about eco-literacy or sustainability, we could actually look, next slide, click it a couple of times, Ms. Habiba. I'm sorry, in true teacher form, I've set this up so that I could deliver it, but you're helping me there. So we've got two different kinds of sustainability. We could look at one as technological sustainability and one as ecological sustainability. So technological sustainability has those three circles there that overlap, where we have the economy, we have ecology, and we have society. Next slide, please, Habib. There we go. And the sweet spot, that sustainable development spot, only occurs right there in the center. And so it's a tricky view. So in this view of technological sustainability, we view our capital as one total group. We have it consists of human capital, it consists of built capital, it consists of natural capital. And as long as the bottom line doesn't change, then we're okay. So we could replace in this model natural capital, our ecosystems, with technology. We could replace it with more humans. We could replace it with other elements, as long as the total stocks don't change. So when we take this model, next one, please, Habiba. If we lose this model of sustainability, then the economic elements that actually are only weakly sustainable. And the idea there is because we are maintaining the total capital stocks, we can hack away at natural capital. We can take away built capital as long as we maintain the human capital at the top. So economically, this actually is quite a weak model for sustainability. And it's quantitative. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The social elements, well, they're centralized. So that means we have a set of experts, we have a set of legislators who sit in the middle and say, this is what we're going to do. Everyone, please follow along. Last click, please. And in terms of the environment, it's anthropocentric, where we can substitute pieces of technology for the environmental pieces that we're willing to lose. So if we took a technological view of sustainability, which I believe is where it's coming from at the moment, is actually it only has weak sustainability. It's that tiny wee section in the middle. Next slide, please. And all of this I'm talking about now is just trying to reframe our understanding of sustainability. So if we take an ecologically sustainable view, and Ms. Habiba, just to help our listeners, if you click it 3 times, you can see that there's a definitive change where now everything operates within the sphere of the environment. Society operates within it, economy operates within that. And if we take this view, then the environment is ecocentric. We learn from and with nature. We now have a localized democracy, so the people that are taking the action are the people closest to the challenge. It's participatory and it has local knowledge and experts. And the economic elements is now we have strong sustainability because we must maintain our natural capital stocks. We cannot lose our ecosystem functions and replace them with technology. So I know that's a little bit complex, but the key idea here is to say, let's not aim for technological sustainability, let's aim for ecological sustainability. And we educate in that way, it then reframes the importance of the environment as the biggest circle and everything operates within it. It's not humans looking outwards in an anthropocentric model. Click across, please. So if I can bring it to where we are and how that actually works in education. So the idea now is I'm educating for ecoliteracy, where ecoliteracy is this way where we think about the world's independent systems and the impact of our human actions upon that system. Where an ecoliterate student will understand how those natural systems work, how they sustain life on Earth, how they apply those principles guiding ecosystems to create sustainable human communities. And that's the exciting part for us as educators. So how do we create those experiences for our learners to ensure that they understand these things from the simplest level for our 3-year-olds and our 4-year-olds right through to our 18-year-olds before they're ready to leave and go into universities. That's the challenge. Just conscious of your time, Ms. Habiba, so if you click across a couple of slides. Next one. Next, there we go. So at the Arbor School, what we do is we focus on experiences. So not only do we have a set, and this is fine, of really key ecoliterate standards. So you can see here that the standards that we have at my school are about diversity, they're about biodiversity, they're about what an ecosystem does for us and what we do for our ecosystem. So for example, all living things in the ecosystem are interconnected. They depend on this web of life to survive. Then under that, we have a set of criteria that helps us to unpick and interpret that and then put that into learning experiences. The study of nature's successful design solutions and imitation of the designs and processes help us to solve challenges. So we can't just have quantitative endless growth, we have to have qualitative growth. We have to mimic natural environmental systems where diversity brings us resilience. So that the more links we have in a school, the more resilient we are to failure. And I think I'm just conscious of your time, Ms. Habiba. If you flick over, next slide, into the last one. There we go, stay on that one, thanks. So I guess the important part here for us as educators, one is to reframe sustainability. It's not about what ecosystems can do for us, it's about us being a critical part of an ecosystem. And a truly sustainable community supports the health and the quality of life by limiting its social and natural systems. It recognizes that we must have justice, we have to look after the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, the cultural, and the spiritual sustenance. And once we understand those parts, then an eco-literate system makes the connections between themselves and the local community. We can, fingers crossed, if that's what we aim for and that's our aspiration, then those children will now understand how to protect our ecosystems, the value of having a diverse ecosystem, and why biodiversity is therefore important. I've sprinted through that quite quickly, but I hope that gives you a taste for what we're doing at the Arbor School here in Dubai. Thank you, Ms. Habiba.
Hello, thank you, Brett. Wonderful, really wonderful presentation, and it heartens me to see this kind of innovative platforms taking place in schools in the country. Wonderful leading example, and I'm sure a lot of the teachers who are with us today enjoyed this presentation, and I'm sure they would want to get in touch.
You're welcome. Sorry, I've lost you for a second there. You're welcome, and I'm sorry, I did have to sprint through it quite quickly. So happy for you to share resources, and for anybody that's interested to contact me at the end of this session as well.
Really a presentation that should be given much more time. So inshallah, maybe in the near future, we will have another opportunity to have a full platform for what goes on in schools. And really environmental literacy. Thank you very much. Okay, our final speakers for
Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry, Habiba, I missed most of that. No? It was all broken up.
Hello?
Hello, you can hear me?
At the Dubai Desert. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him on board. Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Habiba. Sorry, I didn't hear any of what you said. It was breaking up on my side. I hope everybody can hear me.
Clearly.
Okay. I'll introduce myself. I'm Greg Simpkins. I'm a conservation manager at the Dubai Desert Conservation Reserve. I've been in the country involved in this project now in one way or the other, for probably the last 21 years. Starting out initially guiding people out into the desert, and then moving more onto the conservation work within the reserve itself and the expansion of the reserve. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you a little bit of an idea about where the Dubai Desert Conservation Reserve is. This is a map of the Dubai Emirate, and we sit in the southeast corner of Dubai. We border onto Sharjah Emirate in the east, and then in the south onto Abu Dhabi Emirates, or Al Ain, as sometimes people refer it to. Next slide, please. So this is a more detailed map of the reserve. We conserve an area of 225 square kilometers, which is approximately 5% of the total area of Dubai Emirate. Our fence line, it's a fenced reserve. Our fence line is 92 kilometers long, and this is one of our constant programs, is to keep that fence line clear of sand. We welcome about, before COVID-19, obviously, we welcome about 290,000 visitors a year. This program involves some concession holders, 6 concession holders currently, that bring people into the reserve in a sustainable manner, where we have specified routes in which they're allowed to bring people in, and organized activities. So it's controlled in that way. Throughout the reserve, we have also planted, in conjunction with His Highness Sheikh Mohammed's office, over 30,000 indigenous trees. These are mainly ghaf trees, but also some acacias have been planted through the reserve. And we've also completed more than 30 biodiversity research projects, and this is varied across all the different biodiversity we have within the reserve, which I'll get into. Up until this time, we have identified approximately 560 species within the Dubai Desert Conservation Reserve. Next slide, please. You can click it once more. So we have identified 74 different floral species, from our ghaf trees, which I mentioned earlier, through to Acacia tortilis in our trees, but we've also looked at our grasses, our sedges, which I always find a very fascinating plant to find in the desert. I'm from South Africa originally, and I was taught at university that sedges are always found in waterlogged soils because of their shallow root system. And when I arrived in Dubai, I was very surprised to find it not only in the desert, but in the driest parts on top of the sand dunes. And this is what's really fascinating about the desert, and the special adaptations that most species have to survive out here. And that shallow root system enables dune grass or Cyprus conglomeratus to catch up the moisture that we get from mist or fog, like we had this morning, before it evaporates during the day. Next slide, please. So we have identified within the sort of suite of vegetation key site values for the reserve. We're looking at 2 habitats or 3 habitat types here. In particular, sand sheets with perennial herbs. These can be quite productive, as they're quite widespread across the reserve as well. This is our biggest habitat. Then we have interdunal and gravel plain areas. These actually are only about 5 to 8% of the DDCR land area, but contribute quite significantly to the biodiversity within the reserve, because it enables a few different species to survive out here that wouldn't necessarily survive in the habitats, in the sandy habitats. And finally, our ghaf groves. We have 3 natural ghaf groves within the reserve. These are all very old trees that have been established over a long period of time. There's also a history of people living on here, and only recently we found archaeological remains at 2 of these ghaf groves, old pottery, even an old coin we found in these areas. So there are areas that have been used by people probably moving through the area on a regular basis. Next slide, please. We've also identified 44 fauna species. 26 of these are reptiles, which you see here. 7 different snake species, the most common being are vipers, the Arabian horn viper and the saw-scaled viper. But then also a very interesting snake in the sand boa, which is a constrictor that ambushes its prey by lying just underneath the sand. And mostly he'll be eating things like the geckos that you can also see in this image. One of our important species out here that is not actually at this time included in our key site values, but we're hoping to include it in due course, will be the spiny-tailed lizard, or dub. These are predominantly vegetarian that live on these gravel plain areas. And they are particularly impacted by overgrazing in desert habitats, which is something that's a challenge throughout the Arabian Peninsula. Next slide, please. So we have 18 mammal species identified. A number of these are small desert rodents, the most prominent one being Cheeseman's gerbil, which is found extensively in these sand dune habitats or sand sheets, vegetated sand sheets it is. But also things like hedgehog, which is not commonly seen, but they are around. Quite often seen them close to farming areas, but we even have camera trap pictures of these right in the middle of the desert. And then furthermore, things like the Arabian hare, which is a fascinating species because unlike rabbits, of course, it doesn't make a burrow, but just lies even in the midst of summer. We'll find a little bush and make what they call a scraping underneath it and just sit under that bush with its ears flat like you see in this picture so that it doesn't get easily spotted. Okay, we also have, of course, our ungulate species, which we have done reintroductions in 1999. It was one of the first programs that we started of the Arabian oryx, and then sand gazelle and Arabian gazelle. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. Okay, we skipped one. If we could go back one, thank you. Looks like there was a bit of a lag on the. Yes, thank you. That's great. So from our fauna species, the key site values that we've identified, as mentioned earlier, are our ungulates. We now have 1,300 ungulates on the reserve. This is dominated by Arabian oryx, which we have between 750 and 800 now. Our initial reintroduction program reintroduced 150 in a number of reintroductions. Then we have Arabian gazelle up to about 450 now from a reintroduction of 60, and then sand gazelle as well, about 100 within the reserve. These will be really important species now because of their numbers for us to manage and to ensure that they're not having a negative impact, which I'll get into a little bit later. Then we also have identified the Gordon's wildcat as a species of value for the site, which we'll concentrate a bit more on. They are particularly impacted by hybridization with domestic feral cats, and of course by the reduction of their natural habitat through urbanization as the size of the cities grows in the UAE, habitats for Gordon's wildcat, and the movement of feral cats into their habitat is having a major impact on their survival. Next slide, please. We have identified 142 bird species over the years. Many of these are migratory species that will come through in the autumn time or springtime, either going down to Africa or coming back from their African holiday. And but then we also have a number of important species that breed out here. Next slide. With bird species, we've identified our key site values as the McQueen's, or sometimes known as Arabian Houbara bustard. We run a program here in conjunction with the Avian Research Center out of Shwehan, and we reintroduce McQueen's bustards on an annual basis, probably over the last 11 years now, and we've introduced now approximately 2,800 Houbara into the reserve. Of course, birds are not quite the same as our ungulates in that they do have wings, so they can fly out the reserve, and many of them do. What our focus with the McQueen's bustard is really creating a habitat favorable for them within the reserve. And we have some sightings, such as the picture you see here, which is a male showing a breeding display. The female is just behind him, if you can see it, and he's displaying there, so we'll get breeding within the reserve. We've recorded on 2 occasions, we've recorded chicks born within the reserve, and on another 3 occasions, nests within the reserve. So our program is to sort of reinforce on an annual basis through reintroductions this population, and hopefully get a breeding population established within the reserve in the long run. We also look at the Pharaoh eagle owl. This is a breeding species within the reserve. You can see the owl in the picture here is actually sitting on a nest, and the little picture below is some eagle chicks just about to get fledged. And our focus here really is monitoring their population, look at how often they're breeding within the reserve, try to establish something along the lines of what the population is within the reserve, and ensure that the habitat and the biodiversity within the reserve supports them. And this will mainly be through having the right sort of rodent populations within the reserve, which is their main food source. And then with birds, we also probably one of the best sites within the UAE for the sighting of lappet-faced vultures. A number of years ago now, we had the record sighting for vultures within the UAE, with 56 individuals were sighted coming down to an oryx carcass, actually. And there were 3 species in there. The most common one that we see out here, the lappet-faced vulture, was the dominant species, but we also had 3 griffon vultures, and then a very rare sighting of a black or cinereous vulture on that sighting as well. And we'll continue to monitor the lappet-faced vulture populations. They don't breed commonly within the UAE. I think there's 1 record of a nest within the UAE. So not a lot is actually known about our lappet-faced vulture population, where they're coming from, what are their conditions, or their nesting sites, etc. And this is something that we're hoping to look into in the future through some satellite tracking. Next slide, please. Now we've gone through a lot of the sort of key or nice to see species, but when it comes to biodiversity, there isn't a group that contributes more to biodiversity than the arthropods, which includes your insects and scorpions and spiders. And we've identified 300 plus, and the plus is really there because it's a never increasing list. We've been working with a lecturer from Zayed University who's doing some studies on the insects in the reserve, particularly those associated with khaf trees. And on the bottom right of the picture, you'll see 2 traps that are set up there to identify which insects are using which sort of areas in that sort of ground level or into the canopy of the tree as well. And that study has collected, I think, over 300 samples that still need to be sorted. So it's going to contribute quite vastly to our biodiversity of arthropods within the reserve. Next slide, please. So last year we went through quite an extensive process to establish a management plan that will cover the next 5 years for the DDCR. And in particular, we sort of looked at our vision, and our overall purpose and how we're going to move forward. And our vision is a desert haven for nature and a living heritage for people. And then from the overall purpose, bring your attention to really the part that biodiversity focuses on, and that we want to conserve a representation of Dubai's inland desert original landscape and the indigenous fauna and flora. And this will require careful management from our side, and a way of managing the desert that promotes natural systems or natural processes to ensure that really we get good conservation outcomes. Next slide, please. So we identified 6 main strategic management goals for this period, and really draw your attention in this particular context to the first 2. So we're looking at embarking on a new rewilding paradigm for regional desert conservation, where we really focus on thriving habitats and a diversity of indigenous species. And then as well, this is very important if you want to achieve the first one, is that you need to get balance in the populations that you have. Unfortunately, we are within the UAE, but also in many other parts of the world, we're in an environment that is quite fragmented, whether it's by roads or cities, all splitting up our natural habitats. And it means that natural processes of movement of animals is somehow restricted. So it does require some management from our side to promote a balance and natural processes within the natural environment. Next slide, please. So when we look at our rewilding of regional desert conservation, the challenge really is that protected areas within the region have focused on species conservation mainly, and this can be at the detriment to the overall ecosystem. So we see opportunities here for habitat restoration through natural processes once again, and then species reintroductions. And this is where conservation areas like the Dubai Desert Conservation Reserve needs to work hand in hand with organizations such as Alain Zoo to identify species that would successfully be reintroduced into our natural habitats. So in the future, this could be things, species such as a sandcat, which Alain Zoo highlighted. The previously things like ostrich, and even hopefully in the future at some stage to reintroduce a predator to the system to help create a natural balance. Next slide, please. So I spoke briefly about establishing this balance, particularly with our ungulates within the reserve. We've been very successful over the past 15 years in having a healthy breeding population of Arabian oryx. And this population is growing exponentially and continues to do so, which is now unfortunately having some impact on the environment. This is mainly through overgrazing of the natural habitat. So we really look at this as an opportunity to move our conservation of Arabian oryx, sand gazelle, and Arabian gazelle forward, in that we'll embark on a monitoring process with some clear performance measures, and this will include population size with sort of maximum and minimum threshold levels, and then we'll manage the populations in that regard. And this will mean that we'll need to reduce our ungulate population. And the reason we're really doing it that is we see that as an opportunity to really enhance the natural habitat. And by doing that, we'll increase our natural biodiversity through insects, small lizards and rodents within the reserve. And this, as it moves up the food chain, provides more opportunities for small predators like Gordon's wildcat or desert eagle owls to thrive within this habitat, and will enhance the biodiversity within the reserve. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig. Wonderful, wonderful presentation, and it's so refreshing to know that we have got such a diverse types of animals, plants and insects and birds and everything. When you hear UAE, you just immediately, the misconception is that it's a desert environment and we hardly have anything. But when you look at the wealth of the natural environment that we have, and we have to keep on emphasizing on getting this information out there to the masses, to the community at large, to understand what we have. The moment they know that, then they will learn how to appreciate it and then find ways of protecting it. From the wonderful presentations that we have heard this morning, really, it puts to mind, that we need to have a nice comprehensive mapping of who has what where. What do we have on the level of UAE? If we can have, corridors of connecting all these species, and the incredible work that is being done by each organization, and we bring it together so that there is a lot of synergy going on, and the benefit is maximized. Craig, I would like to start with you. Can you share with us, briefly, how did it start? What was the size of the reserve, and what is the size of the reserve today? And what are the challenges that you faced going through that journey?
Sure. So actually, the origin of Dubai Desert Conservation Reserve actually started a few years before the reserve was created with Al Mahar Desert Resort. And there was a small protected area around Al Mahar Desert Resort of 27 square kilometers. This is actually the area that we first did our reintroductions of the Arabian oryx and our 2 gazelle species into. And the main function was for that was to create a natural habitat which visitors for the hotel could come and appreciate. But we quickly realized that if we wanted to make a bigger impact within the conservation work that we were doing, that we needed to look at a wider area. So in around 2000, 2001, we did an extensive survey of the surrounding desert areas and identified the threats that were impacting the desert environment, and things such as litter, overgrazing, off-road driving were things that we really highlighted. And at the end of our report, we put in a suggestion to create a large protected area. And it was an amazing response that we received from the ruler and Sheikh Mohammed, in that within a month, this project was actually handed back to us and said, yes, that's a good idea, make it happen. So that's what happened. And then we embarked on the establishment of the Dubai Desert Conservation Reserve, which is 225 square kilometers. Our main sort of challenges in that transition period were working with tour operators that were bringing people into the desert. At that particular time, there was very little regulation on how people operated in the desert. And we had over 20 companies coming into the northern part of the reserve. They were driving wherever they like and leaving behind a lot of rubbish and of course a lot of damage from four-wheel drive vehicles. So our initial work was actually on establishing routes for tour operators. We asked them all to apply to have concessions within the protected area. And we then selected at that stage 4 tour operators to come into the reserve, and they were on specific routes. So the impact was limited. And then we worked really closely with them to ensure that we are limiting the amount of rubbish that's being produced and making sure that it's not thrown into the desert, and also looking at recycling efforts from all the tour operators. And then just the sort of sustainable use or management of their camps and how they bring tourists in. So that was one of our main challenges. From the environmental side, when we established the reserve, we had 1,200 camels within the area, and this was having a major impact. We've done, at that stage, we did an extensive vegetation survey for the whole of the reserve, and there were big areas that were classed in the report from our botanist as void of vegetation, but there was actually nothing there at all. And it was a long process to help this all improve. And in 2008, most of those camels moved off the reserve, and we were really blessed to have rainfall at about the time that most of the camels were out, and it gave an immediate response from the desert, which also shows you the resilience of this environment, because for many years, anything that grew was eaten straight away, but as soon as they had an opportunity, then the species all came back. There were seeds in the soil for that. So those were our main challenges in our process as we moved from a small protected area to what we are today.
Thank you very much, Craig. You know, this is a social enterprise. You know, this is a wonderful business that is looking at the environmental impact, is looking at the socio-economic, is looking at all other angles of actual sustainable development. Well done, guys. My question to the ladies from Al Ain Zoo. There are quite a few conservation policies and practices that I'm sure is being followed by Al Ain Zoo, and that has been put by the UAE government. Can you please share with us what impact that had on the development of Al Ain Zoo? Again, what will be the challenges that you face? What are areas that you think you need to work on with regard to government policies, with regard to proper regulations? Can you please share with us some of these facts? Dr. Amna?
Yes, Ms. Habiba. Okay. Okay. As a government entity, we have a good partnership with the Emirates of Abu Dhabi and UAE. We are following the regulation of the Environment Agency in Abu Dhabi and the Ministry of Climate Changes. We have a good we have a good relation with them. We are training a lot of students. Regarding what's the other part, Ms. Habiba, the other part of the question? Sorry.
Yeah, the other part was what do you think needs more improvement? What kind of areas that need to be worked on? Are there any challenges you face while implementing the existing regulations?
No, actually, we are facing some of challenges, but for example, availability of space, you know. But recently, we've gone over these challenges we've got a huge fund from the government, and we have about 14 projects, which will be 7 of them will be handed over for operation in the end of 2020, the rest in 2021, which will accommodate, you know, the increased number of animal, and it will give us flexibility in doing more projects and welcoming more species from around the world. For example, we have the elephant safari, which is, we don't have an elephant now within the zoo, but we started building the elephant safari, and you know, with the regulation, with the challenges of bringing some, you know, elephants group to the UAE, it's a bit challenging. But we are, you know, with the cooperation from different entities, we've managed to go over it.
Thank you very much.
So, do you want to input?
Yes. Thank you very much. Brett, my question to you, why did Arbor School decide to bring biodiversity in the premises? Again, what were the challenges that you faced in the process? And do you think by implementing and doing that in your school, you are actually having a positive impact on the overall biodiversity in the UAE?
To go back to the beginning, so the why is quite an easy one, really. So the idea from our founder, our CEO, who's a paleoclimatologist from Cambridge by trade, wanted to bring an element of nature to the children. And so what we're doing is not necessarily just biodiversity, it's rooted in a deep philosophy of ecology. And I guess the challenge of that, because it's actually easy, well, it's not easy, but we can put a space in place, we can put a biodome and we can fill it with animals and plants, etc. But actually understanding how to use that for education is a tricky part. And that's where eco-literacy comes in. So I guess if we have the underpinning philosophy, then we put in place the structures, and then we have to put in place the framework for teaching. And once we get those 3 things in place, then it starts to work quite well. And so then the challenge after that is just to make sure that our educators are really good enough to maximize and optimize the spaces that we have. Again, it's very easy to come and walk. You can see here now I'm sitting in the garden. It's easy to walk around and enjoy the garden, but we don't want this to be a zoo. We don't want it to be a botanical garden. We want it to be a place where children learn. So really working with our teachers to ensure that they are focusing on experiential learning, you know, rich opportunities to come in here and look at systems. And so when you're talking about the smallest, you know, our youngest learners are 3 years old. So when they go to the domes, the biodomes, they see a pond, and the pond has turtles, and the pond has fish, and the pond has algae. And that's okay for the experience at that level, because we know it's backloading them with information, with words, with sensory activities, so that when they get older, well, then we start asking the questions. Well, actually, that's more than a pond, it's a system. Sun feeds the algae feed the fish feed the terrapins. It's a system. So then we can ask questions like, well, what would happen if we took some of those terrapins out? What would happen if we put more terrapins in? And then the older the children get, we can start to add all sorts of different elements in terms of the complexity. So to answer your question in parts, it was really important to us to bring an element of nature to the children. The biggest challenge really is making sure that we are the best we can be at optimizing that nature for education. And then, are we affecting the biodiversity? We are impacting, I guess, on lives as educationalists. So we are helping to ensure the children experience the best of what's been said and done and thought And then once we build that fundamental knowledge as a basis, is then we give them these authentic opportunities to play. So why read about Jack and the Beanstalk when you can walk through the beanstalks and you can feel it and you can smell it and you can sense it and you can look at the curls of the tendrils, so that you're loading yourself with all these experiences and words that you can then go forward and build layers of complexity. So that by the time the children leave the school, hey, this school itself may not have created an eco-warrior, someone who goes out there. It may do, but at least we've shifted the norm. So for everybody now understands the importance of biodiversity, how that impacts upon not just natural but human systems, and the ethical approaches to making sure we solve any challenges we have. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. It has. Can I ask everybody to put their cameras on so that we can have a group photo, a virtual group photo, everybody? And we will be sending to everybody. Can I ask everybody to put their camera on? Thank you very much to see these beautiful faces. Hello, everyone. Okay, we will be sharing with you feedback forms, please, to share with us, your feedback. What are the topics that you would like to be shared, that we should tackle in 2021? What did you think of these virtual platforms that we have been conducting since the beginning of the year? And we have recorded this session as well, so we will be sharing with all our participants the link so that you can enjoy it at your own time. And of course, one of the main purposes of this platform is the networking, is the lessons learned. So I'm sure there will be a lot of curiosity and there will be a lot of interest from different participants. And I'm asking the permission of the speakers today if the participants would like us to share your contact details, to arrange, to facilitate more connection and more connectivity with each of you. If we have that permission, then we will share your contact details. Can we have everybody put their camera on, please? As many of you as you can, so that we can take a group photo. There are so many questions, I still wanted to ask. For example, with Brett, with Dr. Amna, with Craig, what about COVID-19? Did it impose, I'm sure there were restrictions, but did it put ahead, other ways of working, thinking, and conducting your business on a daily basis? If you can just briefly share with you why everybody's coming online.
Sure. I mean, if I could start, Habiba, whilst the others
yes,
are clicking.
please, go ahead.
I'm a school, so I think especially all parents on here will know the challenges that parents face in terms of their own children, and we face as a school in terms of getting back into business. But since we've started again, it's been phenomenal. And actually the hardest 6 months of my term has been the 6 months leading up to the day we open. And then from the day we open, once the children got in and the teachers got in, it's just been fantastic, and they've got on as if as if life just continued. So for us, in terms of that, we're back in business, I would say. The trickiest part was exporting remotely, because it's actually easy to do maths and science and English remotely. What's really hard to do remotely is to engage them in the stuff that you can see behind me. So trying to get them still doing authentic learning experiences and project-based learning and worrying about the ecosystems, worrying about the environment was really tricky to export. So we had to sort of do some deep thinking about how to make sure that our children were still engaged in those things despite not being on site. So yes, it was tricky, but now we're back and we're loving it. So thanks.
Yeah, I'll jump in and answer with regards to COVID. It's really impacted the reserve from a financial aspect. We rely very much on our tourism to bring in revenue for the management and running of the reserve. So that's been a challenge and continues to, and will continue to be for the next year at least, is what everybody is saying, before our tourism starts to pick up again. But having said that, I think it's a really good opportunity to re-look at how we do our projects within the reserve, and in particular from a tourism aspect. A number of our concession holders are looking at how to engage people within the UAE, as opposed to their focus always being outside the UAE. So getting local people, local residents to come in and visit the reserve in different ways. So sometimes it's good just to take a step back, although it might be challenging. I think it helps us get a wider view of what we're doing and how we're going about things. So that's how we'll be looking at it.
Habib, if I could just say one other thing, I mean, I know we're talking to a group of ecologists here. There's one thing
Yes.
we really pushed as a school whilst we were away in terms of our ethos was the fact that sustainability is a community practice. And as a school, that statement of in this together was absolutely critical. We would only survive as a school if we were a community. And so all these ideas that we reinforced of diversity bringing resilience, and the idea of the more interconnected we are, the less likely we are to suffer collapse of our systems. And then also the idea that diversity brings creativity and emergence as an inherent feature of ecosystems, where when we do have a breakdown in systems, is we get creativity, we get emergence. All of these new things have come out of schools. The good things that have come out of COVID are really easily relatable to ecosystem functions and processes. So I think we've been really pushing that message, is that sustainability is a community concept. We can't do it in isolation.
Indeed, well said. Dr. Amna and Hassa, would you like to share with us as well? During the lockdown? Yes.
Since COVID-19 have started, actually, we've been following very, very restricted precautions. And the important point, we were looking and keep monitoring and checking our valuable collection. This is related to the animals, and related to our employee. We have, of course, implemented the virtual work for the office, the office employee. And while on the other hand, we have some of the staff who are practicing their work in their office, as I said, looking after our valuable collection. We have contractors. We have about 14 contractors who's on board, maybe more than 3,000 to 4,000 workers were doing the projects. So every business was as normal, but with following, as I said, very, very restricted precautions. Alhamdulillah, we were okay. The other point that regarding the public and the visitors, we have stopped, of course, the zoo. We have closed the zoo. All these things was happening in the back of house. Recently, we've opened the zoo for public partially for 3 days a week. Started from today, we are open 7 days a week. We will be from 3 to 9. And by beginning of October, we will start from 9 to 8 p.m. So I can say we are business as usual. We are welcoming all our visitors and not to forget to implement all corona aspect and precaution while visiting the zoo.
Thank you very much. The weather is getting much better now. Weekends are ahead of us. I think we can pack our things and really enjoy the outdoors and see what nature can give us. And actually, as Craig mentioned, the resilience of the natural system to come back healthy if we just give it the opportunity. I would like to thank the entities that have supported us. I would like to thank all our speakers for your wonderful presentation, for the wealth of information that you shared with us this morning. I would like to thank our sister organizations who have made it possible and helped us extend this invitation. The Arabia CSR Network, the Emirates Green Building Council, the Clean Energy Business Council, and the Swiss Business Council. Thank you very much, all of you, for making this possible. Do not forget to check our website and see all the activities that we have planned for you in the last quarter of the year, our social media, and the more that we share, the merrier it becomes. Craig, we have a wonderful tree planting program all year, in the right months all over the country, and we have managed to plant and oversee the planting of more than 2,098,000 trees. So if there's any way you think that the EEG community can really effectively participate in increasing the green patch in the reserve on a sustainable manner, please let us know, and we'll be very happy to be involved and support that. If you, Al Ain Zoo, if you have any flyers that you would like us to share, if you would like us to share with our members through our newsletter your program for the rest of the year, we will be happy to do that. As I said, our newsletter is really a platform where we share information and knowledge of our members for everybody. We have a wide network of more than thousands of recipients of this newsletter. So share with us information to enable us to disseminate it as well. And we have international platforms that can know, that will be good for them to know what is happening on the ground, how the community rallies around each other, and how we manage to make things happen. So without further ado, thank you very much everyone for joining us, and have a very fruitful day, and please do answer the feedback forms that will be sent to you. Your feedback is very important for us to enable us to work on our programs and make them better. Thank you very much, and goodbye.